Hey guys, Chris here. Today we have a story from one of our viewers who goes solo hunting in the Savage River country of Maryland. Beautiful country up there. And over the course of the night, he has several frightening things happen to him while he's camping. We're gonna find out what happens. That's next. Okay guys, I am in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. Carson City's down this way, facing east that way, that's south. And there's no snow up here, at least where I'm at. There's snow higher up, but it's been a pretty dry year. Interesting. And speaking of dry, I'm having a premium O'Doul's Amber non-alcoholic beer. And for those that don't drink and those that are in recovery, we're doing this for you guys tonight. So, and this is actually a pretty tasty beer. It tastes like a real beer. It has just a little teeny bit of alcohol in it. You can see the amber. See that? Look at that. Very amber. Cheers. It's got a really interesting finish. It's a little bit sweet, but you can taste the malt to it. And the suds are kind of low, which is kind of nice. And it's very clear. I like amber beer, so O'Doul's Amber, non-alcoholic. Cheers. Also, we have our comment of the week, and this comes to us from Matt. And Matt says, I live in northern Maine and was fishing and camping on a river with a couple of friends and their kids a couple of summers ago, and we were all woke up twice that night around midnight and 2 a.m. to what sounded like something throwing large rocks off the 20-foot ledge on the opposite side of the river. I was sleeping next to the fire with just a sleeping bag. I sat up and they crawled out of their tents, and we didn't say a word, just sat there and listened. I've heard beaver slaps quite a few times, and it's a different sound. We hadn't seen any signs of beavers in the area. I heard a lot of stories about rocks being thrown into water, and it makes me think about that every time. I'd kind of like to believe something was throwing rocks, laugh out loud. Definitely the strangest experience I've had in my time in the woods. Thank you, Matt. Our story comes to us from one of our viewers. His name is Michel. And in the early 1990s, he couldn't remember exactly which year, but it was late that fall, October, early November, Michel was hunting, solo hunting, in the Savage River State Forest of northwestern Maryland, just south of the Pennsylvania border. Beautiful country up there, and the Savage River State Forest is 54,000 acres of rolling mountain ridges, rivers, streams, wildlife, bobcat, black bear, coyotes, deer, and he was deer hunting. There was a little bit of snow on the ground, the river was partially froze over, and there was a spring that he got water from, and he remembered as a child he went there and was able to get water. Michel was still hunting. He was solo hunting with a backpack with the intention of spending the night. But he was also still hunting, which is where you slowly and deliberately move through the forest, and then you stop and you be really quiet, and you look and you listen, and you could stand there for several minutes, hoping for some game to pass by. Not necessarily sneaking up on game, but just trying to blend in and see if you can just see something walking by, as opposed to sitting up in a tree stand or having a couple of friends go through the forest and flush some deer out into a field where you're waiting. He really enjoyed this because it was his way of connecting with nature and being by himself. While doing this, over the course of the afternoon, he scared up 2 black bear as well as several deer, but he was looking for a big buck. He noticed the sun was going down, had about an hour left of daylight, so he was looking for a camp. Good place to set up his tent. He found a little clearing, a stream by, and even a spring. And he collected some firewood. He said it was the wood was mostly wet, so he used pine boughs and mostly pine cones, and he found some wood, got some rocks, made a fire pit, got a fire going, then he set up his tent, rolled out his sleeping bag. He brought a pan down to the spring, filled it up with water, brought it over the fire, set it on a couple of rocks, and proceeded to boil some water for some tea. Then he got his dinner going, made franks and beans, really simple meal, and he was just enjoying himself. He noticed it was really quiet, but not in a spooky kind of way. There was a slight breeze, trees were rustling just a little bit, and it just felt pleasant. He's really comfortable in the outdoors and being by himself. He's sitting there around this fire, and he thought, hey, this would be a good time. Reach in my backpack, pull out his book. Sitting on this rock, and he's reading the book by firelight. Really enjoying that. Nice break from his day of hunting, and looking forward to the next day. Started to think that maybe he should go to bed soon. And right then, he didn't hear anything, he didn't see anything, but he had this feeling come over him. This feeling of vulnerability and being watched. And the hair went up on the back of his neck. And he didn't know what was going on. Like I said, he didn't hear or see anything. So he stood up with his rifle in hand and his flashlight, and he proceeded to go make a perimeter around his camp, searching for any movement or something that was out there, possibly. He gets about halfway around, and he's looking to the south, and he can smell this horrible smell, like something had died and been left laying in the sun for a week. Just horrible, rotting smell. He told me he started gagging. He backed up, went back to the campfire, started breathing, and he's listening and looking. Doesn't hear anything, doesn't see anything, so he decides to sit down and start reading his book again. But he's on red alert. But he wants to pass the time and keep his mind occupied at the same time. Michael mentioned that he spent 4 years in the U.S. Army Infantry and a lot of time in the bush. And it taught him to trust his senses and himself, as well as to always keep his weapon or his gun in his hand, or at least accessible. So he was doing that, but also keeping his mind focused on something besides fear. So he's sitting there on this rock with his gun across his lap, his book in his hand, he's reading. Then he hears to the south of him this whoop, this loud, drawn-out whoop sound. Whoop! Whoop! He gets up, he's got his gun in his left hand, flashlight, walks over to the edge of his camp, and he's looking, shining in the forest. Doesn't see anything. Comes back, he's standing there, just listening, waiting, looking, doesn't see or hear anything, and then he hears this loud tree knock, again to the south of him, like someone took a baseball bat and hit a tree as hard as they could. Just loud crack sound, startled him. A couple minutes later, he hears this whoop sound again. Whoop! Kind of like that, but lower and deeper and louder. I'm no Sasquatch, so that's my best impersonation. He's feeling vulnerable, but he also feels good that he's got his rifle, fire going, and his wits about him. He's not panicking, at least yet. He's standing there listening, and then he hears, and he's not quite sure, but he sounds like somebody or something walking on the snow, like this crunching sound, and then the snow was only so deep and you could hear some sticks and leaves, but because of the campfire he was sitting next to, it was making its own noise, the popping and the sound that fires make. He stepped away and he could hear it in the forest. He decided to take his flashlight and his gun and walk towards it, at least to the edge of his camp in that direction, and shine and look around. It was dead quiet, and he's scanning the forest with his flashlight, and then right then, some clouds moved just enough for the moonlight to come in, and it lit up the area he was looking in. And I've seen that happen. It's dark, and all of a sudden the clouds, you can literally see the clouds moving. If there's a moon, you can see something stationary and the clouds move, and it's really cool because it opens up. Well, this happened to him. And right then when the light hit, he swears he saw some movement from left to right. This large shape or something move, and because his eyes were adjusting to the moonlight and the flashlight and the nightlight, he thought he was seeing things. He wasn't sure what he was seeing, so maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him and they were adjusting. Then he looks and he sees this large shape standing there right in front of the trees with this large tree next to it, and it was motionless. He described it as an indistinct blob, this large shape, and it was not moving at all. And he shines the light at it, he's looking, and it's not moving. He can't quite see what it is. It's just this shape. And right then the wind shifted just enough, the breeze, and he could smell this horrible smell, and it seemed to be coming right from this shape, or at least that direction. And he was feeling a little creeped out by this, that there's something out there, and it's making these sounds, and the smell, and he's seeing a large shape. He's got the gun, the flashlight, and then right then, this rock comes flying over his head. He couldn't see where it came from, but there was clearly a rock. He saw it just for a moment and heard it go by his head, about as big as a softball. His reaction wasn't what you expect. He got pissed. It wasn't fear or let's run and get in the tent. It was, he got pissed. And I've said this before, I think when people hear things in the forest from possibly a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, they're being tested. These things are trying to see what you're going to do. So they throw a rock, tree knock, make a sound, stepping in the forest. This is not the sounds that a predator makes. A predator is trying to be absolutely quiet until the last second, and then it can attack you. This thing's just, all right, let's see what he does. He got pissed, and he's looking at this shape, and so he takes this 300 Magnum Winchester rifle, and with a scope, and he aims it towards that shape, and he can't quite see what it is, so he aims at the tree to the right of it, and he fires a shot off into the tree. And when he shot it, this thing just roared. It was really loud. Hits the tree, and right then, that shape started running from right to left now, really fast. And it was heading towards the tree line, and it was angling in there, and you could see it moving really quickly, and at the same time, Michael hears this deep, low growl coming from this thing as it's running. It hits the forest, and you can hear it crashing into the forest as it disappears, and now you can hear it running straight through the forest. This loud crashing sound just slowly fading out. Michael's standing there, and he's shaken, and he takes another round, puts it in the chamber, shoves it in, and now he's looking, and he's thinking, I need to get back to my camp. And he backs up, turns around, goes back to his camp, and he's just standing there waiting and listening. He knows it's going to be a long night, so he immediately puts some more firewood on the fire. Michael stood there for about 15 minutes listening intently. Didn't hear anything, didn't see anything else. Decided, okay, I'm going to sit down, get back to my book. So he sat there on this rock, and he read his book until about 2 a.m., did not hear anything else, and thought, okay, I'm going to get in the tent, get the boots off, get in the sleeping bag, and he lied there for about 30 minutes listening. This is the most vulnerable he felt because he can't see anything because he's in the tent, he's laying on his back with his boots off, his gun is at his side, but it's not in position. He doesn't hear anything. It's like, okay, he falls asleep. Slept the rest of the night, gets up, gets out of his bag, gets his boots on, unzips the tent, can see the fire still got some embers in it. Walks over, adds a few more pine boughs, a few pine cones, stokes up the fire, gets some water going for his tea. He keeps his breakfast pretty simply, just a couple of trail bars and his tea, that's it. And then he decides to walk over to this tree where this event happened the night before. He walks over there, and you can see the bullet in the tree where it hit, the bark was missing. And then he looks down and he sees these 17 to 18-inch footprints in the snow, kind of scattered around, and then he can see where it took off running. And he was astonished to see these prints. They were huge, 17, 18 inches. And he said the stride was about 3 times his stride. So I'm guessing he thought if he was like running, what his stride would be, and it was 3 times that. So if his was 2.5 feet, 2.5, 3 feet, it was like 6, 7 feet between steps, something like that. Really wide stride. He could tell this thing was just flying. Right then, he had that feeling of being watched again. He didn't like that, and his senses were just up. And then he also noticed it was really quiet. It didn't just suddenly get quiet, but it was quiet, and he just felt like, okay, I need to get out of here. Walks over to the fire, takes his canteen, puts the fire out, packs up his gear, gets his tent down, packs it all up. So Michael finishes getting his backpack all secured, takes one last look. He's really grateful that he's got this opportunity to leave. It's not dark again, and he's got all these things happening around him. He's happy to get out of there. Starts hiking out. He's got 2 ridges to go over, these big rolling ridges. And he's going through the forest. There's a slight breeze. It's at the base of the first ridge. And you can hear the slight breeze, but at the same time, he hears this whistling sound in the wind. And it kind of blends in. And it's really creepy to hearing this whistling sound. There's nobody around. He keeps going. He's in this deep forest. And again, he hears the whoop sound. The deep, low whoop, whoop. Like that. I'm getting an echo up here. But he hears that one more time. He goes up this ridge. He's going through the forest. And he gets kind of an opening, kind of a clearing like I'm at here. And he's looking down. And he can see a shape coming through the meadow and heading for the trees. He pulls up his scope on his rifle. He looks down at it. He can clearly see this thing now. He said it was about 8 feet tall or more. It was hard to tell exactly the height. Really broad shoulders, dark hair from head to toe. Really dark jet black hair, blacker than black. You could see some face on it, possibly even a nose, like a flat nose. It was just like shapes and a little bit of coloration differences. This thing disappears into the trees. It's about 100 or so yards away. He keeps going up over this ridge, comes down the other side. He's going through the forest. He's listening. Doesn't hear anything this time. The breeze is still going, just a light breeze. Goes through the forest, goes up the next ridge, looks back, looks down. He sees something again. This time it's a little more obscured, but he sees some movement in the trees. And he knows this thing is maybe not necessarily escorting him out of the forest, but it's definitely keeping track of him, keeping tabs on him and his progress out of the forest. He feels relieved that the truck is coming up pretty quickly. Comes down the other side, goes through the forest, doesn't hear anything else. He's looking over his shoulder, gets to his blazer, opens the door, takes the bullets out of the rifle, puts it in the front seat, sets it right there, has the bullets in a box there, puts a backpack in the back, and he drives away. And he knows this experience has changed him somewhat. It's just to have all these things happen. He had like the full menu of Bigfoot activity. The smell, whoop sound, tree knock, something walking in the forest, actual sighting, this feeling of being watched. All these things seem to happen this one night and the next morning. Really crazy. He says he still hunts in the Savage River State Forest. Believe it or not, but he still hunts there. But he says if he ever has that feeling come over him, he just leaves. He immediately turns around and leaves. He doesn't want to deal with anything. And I don't know if he spends the night anymore, if they're just day trips. He didn't mention anything about that, but I've been trying to get a phone call through to him. We'll ask him a few questions about this. Maybe I'll post it later, or maybe a midweek thing. That'd be kind of cool. But that's our story from Michael in Maryland from the early 1990s. Thank you, Michael. That was a really interesting story. He really handles himself well with this. I don't know how I would have handled it. I probably would have went, I think it's time to go in the tent, or pull out Mr. Tripod and camera and see if we can get some video and maybe a selfie or something. Hi, it's right behind me here. And that might scare him off more than a gun would. I don't know, but... So if you guys like stories about the strange, unexplained, and things that go bump in the night, like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. It always helps me out. And I always appreciate your comments as well. You guys leave great comments. And we get a lot of comments, 400, 500, 600 or more on any given video. It's pretty amazing. A lot of comments. So keep commenting. I'll keep going. And you guys keep hiking. We'll see you next time.